Senator Tom Cotton, United States Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas, a member of the Senate Committee on Armed Services. Good morning, Senator.
Hey, Bill. It's great to be on with you as always.
Great to have you. How's that family?
Doing very well. Our son just turned 6 weeks old last night. He's going through a little bit of a growth spurt, which keeps us up at night a bit, but it's very cute and very fun.
Tell the truth. How much help are you?
I try to be a lot of help. Mom feeds him his bedtime feeding, but then she goes to bed, and I top him off and give him a bath and rock him to sleep.
Good man. I was told basically that after I changed the diaper and dropped him on the floor, and had him in the toilet bowl, not in the toilet bowl, on top of the toilet, and dropped him on the floor, hit his head, and Elaine said, I'll call you when they're 12.
I've not yet put the penalty box, but that's coming as I throw him up in the air and do other little stuff.
That's right. That's the best thing you can do, by the way. Throw him up in the air, hold him up high. We used to do up high dad big time. Senator, how's the Senate? You enjoying yourself? Hardest job you've had? I'll bet you've had harder jobs.
I can't say it's a harder job than working on Lynn Cotton's farm as a young boy, or serving in the Army.
Right.
But it is a great honor to serve the people of Arkansas there, and we've made some progress this year on important issues like giving our military the more resources, not enough resources, but more resources.
Yeah.
And we're going on with that right now as we're considering the Annual Defense Authorization Act this week under John McCain's leadership.
Big deal. That's exactly right. This whole sequester thing is a problem, isn't it?
It really is. I don't know anyone in Arkansas, at least, who doesn't agree that national security is the first priority of our government.
Yep.
And it's the one area of government where we have to take an assessment of the threats and develop a strategy and then let the strategy drive the budget. And we have to spend money on our common defense first. And then whatever's left over, we can assess where we can spend it on very important other government priorities. But our national security has to be the first priority.
Right. Okay. Speaking of strategy, let me just interject. I found it interesting. You talked about the cotton farm and serving in the Army. You didn't talk about the rigors of Harvard Law School, right? Good for you. Me neither. I went there, and they have these books they write about how hard it is. Give me a break. The most privileged place in the world, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, sitting in an air-conditioned classroom listening to a bunch of professors talk is not exactly trying to bale hay in 100-degree weather or kill bad guys in 120-degree weather.
That's it. Thank you. Well said. Perfectly said. That's great. Speaking, you used the word strategy. Of course, this is all around from yesterday, but I have to get your take on President Obama.
When a finalized plan is presented to me by the Pentagon, then I will share it with the American people. It's not. We don't yet have a complete strategy because it requires commitments on the part of the Iraqis as well about how recruitment takes place, how that training takes place, and so the details of that are not yet worked out.
I have an analytic or epistemological problem here. I understand you maybe can't execute a strategy till you know what you have in place and what your resources are. But you can develop or think up a strategy, can't you? And 9 months ago, the president didn't have one either. Is this conceptually that difficult, Senator Cotton?
No, Bill, it's not. And the news that we don't have a strategy is not surprising to any American. I mean, you can see that on the ground in Iraq as the Islamic State takes cities like Ramadi and begins a Ramadan offensive over the next month. What's news is the president is acknowledging once again that we don't have a strategy 10 months after he said we didn't have a strategy and just a few more months before that when he called the Islamic State the JV team. I also say I have to take exception to his point that he's implicitly laying the blame on the military for not providing him options. I'm quite confident the military has provided him numerous options. He simply has put political limitations on what the military is capable of doing in Iraq to actually achieve his goal, which is to defeat the Islamic State.
That, you anticipated my next question. I don't know the military like you know the military. I have a son in the military, but he knows it better than I, but you know it better than he. You've been at it longer. But if you went over to the Pentagon and gathered up, your 6 favorite generals, some of these guys would have an idea as to what to do, correct? Putting it very simply.
No doubt, Bill. And they would provide numerous courses of action. This is the core of the military decision-making process, whether it's done at the company level where I operated or the national strategic level. Military leaders develop multiple courses of action, and then they present it to a commander, in this case the commander-in-chief. And the commander-in-chief chooses the course of action that he thinks will best achieve his strategy. President Obama, though, has a very bad habit of trying to reach political compromises when dealing with political strategy. You may deal that when you're talking about spending on domestic issues, but when you're trying to fight and win a war, arbitrary political compromises or political limitations are not an effective approach.
I've had some problems in the past, the Pentagon, in some of my government jobs, and that politics is not unknown there. It's been known to be practiced there. People also sometimes try to curry favor with the commander-in-chief. But I've also seen presidents go to the Pentagon, I've been with a couple of them, who said, all right, forget what you think I want. What is the best way to go about this? I wonder if that conversation's been had at the Pentagon. It's a speculative question. I'm not sure you know the answer, but
I couldn't speculate on it. But for instance, the president has an arbitrary 3,000 person cap on the number of troops we have in Iraq right now.
Okay.
We heard testimony earlier this summer from Jack Keane and Fred Kagan at the Armed Services Committee that said the number should probably be around 10 to 15,000 of not just frontline troops, but also numerous kind of combat support specialists, intelligence analysts, and aviation experts, logistics advisors, and so forth. He did this in 2009 as well with his surge into Afghanistan. He was presented with multiple courses of action by the commanders, and then he put an arbitrary political cap, which ended up undermining the very goals he was trying to accomplish.
Do you agree with that advice? You said Keane and who else?
Jack Keane and Fred Kagan.
Yeah, Fred Kagan, sure. Do you agree with that analysis, that number, basically?
I think they're closer to correct than the president, who has this arbitrary 3,000 personnel cap. One of the problems we've seen with President Obama and the Pentagon and its military decision-making process is because of the limitation he places on them. We don't get the full analytical resources of the Pentagon to make these decisions as civilian policymakers. You see it again in the budget. Many senators like myself cite the 2012 Bob Gates budget as the baseline of what we should be spending, about $610 billion, partly because Secretary Gates had already found multiple sources of savings in the budget at the time, partly because that was the last time the Pentagon was truly able to engage in a threat and strategy-based budgeting as opposed to budget-based strategizing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me put a question this way. If because this is what a liberal said to me the other day. Look, I'm watching your candidates for president on the Republican side. Nobody is saying let's commit a large number of boots on the ground. And as you just quoted Keane and Kagan, they said 10 to 15. That's not a huge number. It's not like what we had before in Iraq and Afghanistan. And you said that's more or less true. But then this guy, just give me one other piece, then you can respond to both parts. He said, but then if you're putting limits on 10, 15, 20, you're going to have to count on the Iraqis, and the poor president can't count on the Iraqis. Now go ahead, Senator Cotton, please.
Well, so I would say the reason that General Keane and Fred Kagan are closer to the truth than what I think President Obama has imposed as a cap is that they engage in serious battlefield analysis about the mission, the primary kinds of troops we need to accomplish our mission, like forward air controllers or special operations, train and advise teams, in addition to the support troops that we need, such as security, medevac, and so forth. Before I would make a final decision, I would want the full resources of the Pentagon and their military decision-making processes to validate what General Keane and Fred Kagan have been able to do from the outside. That's the first point I would make. But the second point, I would disagree with your liberal friend that Republican presidential candidates have shied away from this. Scott Walker just said this weekend that he will not rule out boots on the ground. Lindsey Graham has said we need substantially more troops there. Okay. The key thing that we have to remember is the Islamic State is not ruling out any options.
Right.
And if we want to defeat our enemies, the United States can never rule out any options necessary to keep our country safe.
And is the good correction, good response, is the fact of the Iraqi army a given? What do we make of this? Was Ash Carter too hard on them? I saw that Dempsey said, when someone said they were driven out of Ramadi, he said they weren't driven out of Ramadi, they drove out of Ramadi. But this morning, we were reminded that they fought for 3 months in Ramadi. Just how much can we rely on the Iraqis now or in the near future?
They did fight for many weeks. They were one reason they were finally defeated in the end is a series of massive car bombs that the Islamic State conducted in Ramadi against Iraqi lines. We have to rely on the Iraqi army and the Iraqi security forces, and they are somewhat of a mixed bag. Some forces, especially their special operations forces, are more capable than other forces, but that's part of the reasons why we need those enablers there. Much of the problems they have are not frontline trigger pullers, but they are the kind of specialists that an advanced army has. Logistics experts to make sure that when you have frontline troops lacking ammo, you don't have ammo on pallets and crates back in the rear. Those are the kind of specialized services that they still need assistance on. And if we had kept troops, the small number of troops in Iraq in 2011 that our generals requested, we might not need that now. The Islamic State might not have risen to power.
Good logistics officers matter, don't they?
Absolutely.
Then let me frame the question this way. Is the Iraqi, with sufficient U.S. support, whatever the number is and however it's put there, 15,000, 20,000, is the Iraqi force good enough with the right degree of American support to defeat ISIS?
I believe so, Bill. It was good enough in the aftermath of the surge as American troops began to draw down. But it's not just the Iraqi army. We have to have the support of the full Iraqi government, as well as the support of Sunni tribal leaders, where much of these battles are being fought. That was an essential component of the success in 2007 and 2008. Not simply the surge of additional troops, but also the support of Sunni tribal leaders in Anbar, who are finally sick and tired of what Al Qaeda in Iraq were doing to their people, and the Islamic State is the successor to the to Al Qaeda in Iraq. So that's why it's so important that we also continue to insist that the Iraqi government treat Sunnis in Anbar with respect and adopt pluralistic representative policies.
Last question, 30 seconds. Shifting gears into another. Well, you said Shia Sunni here. Will Iran, supposing we disappeared from the face of the earth, would Iran let Iraq go to ISIS?
They probably wouldn't want to, Bill, but remember, Iran has had Shiite-backed militias fighting throughout the country, and they proved themselves to be paper tigers. They weren't capable of retaking Tikrit a few months ago.
Okay.
All they are capable of doing is fomenting sectarian violence. That's why Iran's role in Iraq is so destabilizing.
Okay, so if we were out completely, they wouldn't prevail against ISIS in any short term.
It would be a fool's errand to count on Iran to stabilize Iraq, partly because they're sectarian, partly because they're not very skillful.
Thank you, Senator Cotton, so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill.